Welcome into Football and Other F-Words. My name is Zach Lyons. We're back down to two. We did not fire Stoney. Stoney's actually doing something really healthy with his life and not worrying about Titans football for the week. He's with his wife as they go up for a wedding. So congratulations to Stoney for not having to worry about the Tennessee Titans for at least one episode.
By the way, Zach,
Go
your
ahead.
audio sounds like it's coming in through your computer.
Okay, I thought it must be coming in through something else. So give me 1 second here, because it was sounding weird in.
How about now? We good?
Yeah. There you are.
Coming in through my Galaxy Buds for whatever reason. Either way, sorry for that, but Stoney is out with his wife. He's traveling up to New Jersey for a wedding. So we got a lot to talk about, and it all centers around one guy, Tyler Boyd, but he has a cascading effect around this entire Tennessee Titans offense, namely Will Levis, Brian Callahan, and Treylon Burks, of course. And, of course, those other guys that probably weren't going to that were struggling to make the team anyway, but we're going to be into starting lineup, like Kyle Phillips, Shaquan Jackson, Mason Kinsey, those guys. They would have been in the starting lineup at some point, but hopefully not now. Bluegrass Beverages, Hendersonville, Tennessee. Mike, this would be a great time for you to get onto Bluegrass Beverages website and figure out what you need to buy while you're down in Texas, because rest in peace, Kyle Pecco, who along with Julius Chestnut, will never be on the Tennessee Titans Final 53 ever again, because Kyle Pecco has been somewhere else. So rest in peace, your off-season darlings that are scrubs.
And Chestnut's roasting on an open fire season is still coming here in July. So, yeah, I'm not scared.
Dylan Johnson is going to put out that flame, and you are going to be in shambles, because I don't know who you root for after that. With those two guys gone, who you come on this podcast and overinflate their sense of self-worth more than those two guys. So we'll just have to see where we land on that. It'll be interesting to see. You'll probably that tied in with three names. That will be your next Chestnut or Kyle Pecco, I would assume. What's that guy's name again?
David something Robinson something. He's got a long name, and I have not.
You gotta learn it, because you're running out of options of guys to root for this team, and you gotta start getting on that and learn that name. But Bluegrass Beverages is our sponsor, Hendersonville, Tennessee. Been working for over 50 years. Oh man. There's just a lot to get to, and this Tyler Boyd thing has so many layers to it. Glory Day Sports says Mike's a big Quentin Bohanna fan, I hear. I'm still not entirely convinced Quentin Bohanna is a real person. Never seen him, never heard talk, and still not convinced he's a real person, or he's someone under witness protection using the name Quentin Bohanna.
And everyone knows that my obscure interior defensive lineman of choice is Keandre Coburn for obvious reasons, and the fact that he's going to be Tandre Sweat's accountability buddy. So,
I want to put my hat in the ring. If there's any Titans people listening, I will be Tandre Sweat's sober buddy, putting it on the record. I'll be sober and make sure that he stays decisions. And, it's kind of like the first step in that app that me, you, and Lebowski and Buck, try to put together, where, you make a bet, you try to make a decision at 3 a.m. It should just automatically tell you no. I'll be that no. I will be sober for Tandre Sweat. I'll make sure that he gets on practice on time. He doesn't eat any unhealthy food. I'll be I'll call it a sober buddy, but it's more like a life coach. Let me be Tandre Sweat's life coach.
Yeah, we just need his phone to tase him when he turns into Edley's parking lot or something like that,
There you go. Well, he could get a barbecue salad at Edley's. Do they do barbecue salads at Edley's? I don't eat healthy at Edley's, so I don't know what that menu looks like. But we give a salad or something, put some barbecue on top of it. But I'll do that for Tandre Sweat. But there's a lot to get to with this Tyler Boyd thing, because there's so many incorrect narratives out there.
Oh my God.
And there are some things that we don't agree with, that we disagree on. But as far as the narratives go, it's just kind of it's just weird, right? There's narratives that Colton Dow is was teaching Treylon Burks routes, which was never said. I mean, I feel like if that was said, that would be definitely something that we would have talked about on this podcast.
Yeah.
If he actually said something like that. And there's people who say that Treylon Burks didn't know the playbook last year. I know he struggled with it the year before, but I don't remember anything. I mean, he just struggled in general, but I mean,
Yeah.
I know there's that one play where DeAndre Hopkins had to tell him where to line up, and that was the only play. But that happens in the NFL. But again, maybe that's something that I've missed, and I just haven't seen it. And then there's people that are taking the conjecture report from, those articles, Mike, that everyone writes. These players should be on the trading block, or these 3 teams should trade for this player. And then people mistake conjecture and kind of like lazy dot connecting and turn it into, well, the team hates said player. So there's a lot about this Tyler Boyd thing. But I think the most important thing is, what does this do for Will Levis in your eyes? Because I was talking about it with Braden on Monday's show, and we were talking about, we kind of went all over the map, but we were talking about quarterbacks on the AFC South and the level of pressure that they're under and how they have different kinds of pressure to be under, the different kinds of pressure they are under. And I've been on this train that the Tennessee Titans are doing enough before Tyler Boyd that if you get a full 17 game, at least 14 plus, right? Let's say 14 plus. I think that's a good number for a starting quarterback to actually play. You should be able to find out what you got in Will Levis. They've upgraded the offensive line in several key to the best wide receiver core on paper that it's ever seen. And they still have tight ends. They have the running backs. They brought in an offensive head coach. They have this whole new crew, right? That you should be able to find out what you have in Will Levis. And if he gets injured and misses 7 or 8 games, I feel like that should tell you what you have in Will Levis as well. But that's a different discussion.
Yeah.
But isn't Tyler Boyd just another player for you to finally have an answer on Will Levis? Because the NFL's, it's like you get 2 years with the quarterback to figure out if he's the guy or not.
Yeah, and I think this is what you're supposed to do. This is what you're supposed to do. And I don't know why the national – well, actually, I feel like I do know why the national media is like, well, what are the Titans doing? Do they really think that Will Levis is the guy? It's like
the same reason they still think Trevor Lawrence is an elite talent.
It's this ridiculous
confirmation bias.
Clutching to their pre-draft picture of Will Levis, which they did, which we didn't like him either coming out of the draft, right? But eventually you move on and base it on what does the player show at the NFL level, and he showed enough.
It's not like any of us are bringing up 2021 stats like they matter. I mean, we're talking about what you saw in the regular season. Was there enough there? And I think that's how you should view. You shouldn't just keep skewing everything towards being right 5 years ago about a player.
Right, exactly. But yeah, I think the national folks they don't understand it. But like, this is what you're supposed to do around a young quarterback. Whether you drafted him number 1 overall, like Bryce Young, who then had a way worse year than Will Levis as a rookie, or if you drafted him number 33 overall, like they did with Will Levis. And I think they're surrounding him with enough talent that you're going to get a real read on it. Now, look, I think there's some injury concerns with the wide receiver position. You've got, one guy that's going to be 32 in DeAndre Hopkins, and then, the other 2 are both at 29. I think they're going to be 29 for most of the season in Ridley and Boyd. It's an older group, but I actually don't mind that at all because you're dealing with a young quarterback. You're dealing with a quarterback who, frankly, his senior year at Kentucky had 2 true freshman wide receivers that were basically the primary ball catchers in that offense. Didn't really know what they were doing, right? And then he comes to Tennessee, and last year he had one guy who really knew what he was doing and was good. I think NWI knows what he's doing. I just don't think he's good. But one guy who's good and actually knows what he's doing in DeAndre Hopkins, and I think he at times locked onto him too much last year because he was the only one he trusted in big spots. And I think that got him in trouble on some of the turnovers, some of the, balls that maybe he was forcing into coverage that wind up being incomplete. Just because that was the only guy he was like, all right, I know where he's going to be. And I know that he's going to give me at least a chance to win. And I don't mind him actually doing that in that situation because none of the other guys were trustworthy in my opinion. Yeah. But now you got 2 more and 2 more that bring different skill sets to the table. And I just think that's going to make a huge difference for Will Levis and his confidence just to run the offense and not feel like he has to force everything to DeAndre Hopkins. So I think what they're doing is the right way to build this thing, and I think you're going to get a real read on Levis this year.
I mean, sign good players, right? I mean, acquire good players, whether that's through the draft or whatever. It seems like an easy motto to live by, but this Tennessee Titans team has struggled with identifying the good players, and I really like the Tyler Boyd addition. I think it slots everybody not in their proper like role as wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, but in the proper really slots for what you want these players to see, how much you want these players to see the field. And you ultimately want, Treylon Burks to turn into to really have the light click on for him. But at this point, you can't, in the grand scheme of things, he's not a NFL wide receiver 1. He probably, his ceiling, and this is kind of something I think we talked about after last summer, is that we had this concern that really Treylon Burks' ceiling may be just a wide receiver 2, and this is the best chance that he's going to have to maybe put it all together to do it, because he's already been training and working with DeAndre Hopkins. I'm sure that Calvin Ridley and they probably have all gotten together as well. Don't know that for sure, but I do know that DeAndre Hopkins has mentioned working with Treylon Burks, and you're going to have probably, no offense to, well, screw it, a little offense to Rob Moore, you're going to have a better wide receiver coach than what you've had the previous 2 years for Treylon Burks, and less pressure. And I think maybe sometimes you want your wide receiver to be able to handle the pressure and have that diva mentality, but not every wide receiver has that. And I think we just have to be honest with ourselves about what Treylon Burks is. And Treylon Burks is, at best, a wide receiver 2 on the outside. And that kind of brings us into this narrative that I think started from a fan account somewhere, and I can't remember which fan account it was, but there was a fan account who said that, oh, well, Treylon Burks played the slot in college. He played all these snaps, so with Ridley and D-Hop, now he could be the big slot and he's going to thrive. And it kind of got this narrative, and you wrote about it at paulkarski.com, this narrative that he was going to be the slot guy never died. Even after the draft or heading into the draft, even after his name wasn't mentioned, it just never really died. And I think what people thought was that we're talking about Treylon Burks is going to get 80-90% of the slot snaps, and he was going to be the main slot receiver. And I don't think that was ever going to be the case. He was going to get snaps, obviously, in the slot. But I am pretty sure, by the way, that Brian Callahan has spoke about it, and so far he hasn't really lied about anything that he's everything that they've said, you can kind of take to the bank because they're going to do it. They said they needed a slot. The only thing we're still, but everything else they've kind of,
and they've got to sign a safety. They will, but they've got to sign a safety.
But I mean, they've been pretty much upfront about everything, right? They said they needed a slot guy, someone to step up to slot guy role, and I guess after OTAs or a veteran minicamp or whatever workouts that was, I guess they said, okay, well, Tyler Boyd, before the draft, we were in contact with him. After the draft, we sign him. That kind of tells you what they think about everything else, and they didn't even mention them. And then after the draft, I believe Brian Callahan was on Ramon Kalen Will after the draft. No, 3HL, because Ron Slay, put on a Treylon Burks jersey or something.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
he said, well, I think people overblew me not mentioning him out of proportion, but he'll probably see some slot snaps, which is kind of saying he was going to see some slot snaps, but he wasn't going to be the slot guy. Like, he's going to be the mismatch guy. Maybe Ridley goes inside, he goes outside, or he comes inside, Ridley stays outside. They were going to create mismatches, but I don't think he was ever going to be. He was going to be a wide receiver 3 in snap count. I mean, probably, I would say so. I mean, it's going to be kind of hard with NWI there as well. But I think that at the end of the day, without Boyd, he probably would have been wide receiver 3. But I felt like that was wide receiver 3 with 425 snaps. Like, I don't think it was going to be like 600 or 700, 800 snaps. And I think that's where the disconnect for me, thinking that Boyd is really going to take much away from him, because I was really only thinking he may see 80 snaps in the slot without Boyd there, maybe 100. But I think it was going to be a big platoon model. Like, I think a lot of people are, and I know I'm going long-winded and I want you to talk, but I want to lay out what I'm trying to say. I think a lot of people see 11 personnel and automatically think, well, 11 personnel, there is going to be no tight end in that slot. And I do think I think that there was going to be a lot of 11 personnel, but I also think that there was going to be a pretty hefty amount of Chig in the slot, because I think that ultimately, if you're trying to get your best 3 players on the field in receiving situations, Chig is one of those guys, and he played the most slot snaps for the Tennessee Titans last year. I wouldn't have been surprised if maybe because of how the wide receiver room may have shaken out without Tyler Boyd, if Chig still probably didn't lead the snap slots. But I also think that Jaquan Jackson was drafted, Kyle Phillips, Tony Pollard. I think they were going to have to get creative with the slot position, because I don't think they have faith in Treylon Burks in the slot, regardless of Tyler Boyd's presence or not. So that's kind of where I was at. Like, I think without Boyd, we're talking about 25 snaps per game, and based off like 1088, snaps, which is what the Bengals had last year. And I'm thinking like 340 with Boyd, but it's not that the outside slots are really changing. It's really that the outside snaps are changing. It's really that the slot snaps are changing. And so it does affect, but I don't think it had, in my mind, I was already prepared for a 25 snaps per game kind of mindset. I wasn't thinking 35 to 40 snaps per game for Treylon Burks.
Yeah, see, I thought he was going to play more than 25 snaps a game if he was the third wide receiver basically in the pecking order. Obviously, like, Hopkins, Ridley are going to be somewhere in the like 750 to 1,000 snaps. Like that's Hopkins played 750 last
Calvin
year.
Ridley played what, 87% last year? I
think. Calvin Ridley
High
played
80s.
3 snaps short of 1,000, 997 snaps last year for Jacksonville. They're going to play a ton. Like, you didn't pay Calvin Ridley, $23 million a year to come not play a ton for you. So I just feel like those snaps were always going to be there. Last year the Bengals, and I broke this down at paulkowarski.com, so you can get like more detail about this there, but I'll keep the short version here. They had 3,040, so just say 3,000 wide receiver snaps. They split that up among really 5 players. There was 4 guys who played like a smattering of snaps. Charlie Jones, I think, had like 40 snaps. He was their punt return specialist / backup slot guy. He played like 40 snaps last year, and there was 3 other guys that played like 5 or less. But 5 guys basically played all of the wide receiver snaps for the Bengals last year. Jamar Chase led them with 890. Tyler Boyd was second with 824, and T. Higgins was third with 573. But he missed 5 games in that. So I think in a situation where they're all healthy, those guys are all playing somewhere between like 50 to, Higgins was at 47.8. And I think that includes a couple partial games too. So I think he's safe to say between 45 and 55 snaps per game for the top 3 receivers in that offense. And then you drop down pretty significantly to Trenton Irwin, who was at 26.8. Again, that's boosted up a little bit by the fact that he was playing some games for T. Higgins where he was, basically a starter at that point. And then Andre Yusovich was at 16.6. So small bit roles for those 2 guys. I think the distribution is going to be kind of similar. And I think without Boyd,
it will now for sure.
I think without Boyd, though, in my mind, I was thinking, well, your best slot receiver on the roster without Boyd is DeAndre Hopkins. Your second best is probably Calvin Ridley. So, like, to get your best 3 on the field, I think you're going to see a lot of Hopkins in the slot and probably Burks outside, or just some combination of those 3 at those 3 positions. Because I do think, like, Hopkins can clearly play all 3. Ridley can definitely play all 3. NWI can play all 3 too. And I think NWI is hurt by this too, because I think he would have seen a good number of snaps in the slot and elsewhere. So
and that's kind of where my head's at. It's like my head was like, I get the sense that this team is very much like you have a defined role we want you in, but we want you to be able to play multiple spots in a pinch or to create mismatches. So in my mind, it's DeAndre Hopkins and WI are your X receivers. And then, but they could go into the slot. And Treylon Burks and Calvin Ridley are your Z receivers, and they can probably play in the slot. And then, like, you have your slot guys, right? Like, I think the defined slot roles is pretty, it's kind of like the third down running back guy. Yeah. So in my mind, it's like, I kind of feel like Kyle Phillips would have seen, without Tyler Boyd, probably a fair share. Now, obviously, injuries are involved, but when he's on the field and he's been allowed to be a target, he's been very effective. I mean, he was a healthy scratch for, 4 games last year for whatever reason by Mike Vrabel and company. And I think that, while I don't think Kyle Phillips is going like Tyler Boyd, 800 snaps or anything, I do think that if you're talking about trying to figure out how to distribute 800 and something slot snaps, right? Mm-hmm. I think that there would have been a healthy dose of Kyle Phillips, Chigakonkwo. I think it just wouldn't have been, I don't think Tyler Boyd, or I don't necessarily think that Treylon Burks was going to go into the slot. And now that Tyler Boyd's here, he ain't going to really go outside, I don't think, in these same situations. So I feel like it affects Boyd's slot snap counts, but I still feel like he's going to get the same, like 312 versus 323. Like, I think it's, I think he would have been different.
Way higher, because I think Hopkins would have played so many.
His outside slots would have been higher than 300 and something. I mean,
we're talking about 3,000 snaps. So if we say like Hopkins and Ridley are going to play like 1,800 of those roughly, you got 1,200 snaps that you've got to divide up between. And that's just, by the way, this is just wide receivers. Obviously the Bengals had tight ends and stuff like that. And sure, I agree that they could have played Chig in the slot some, but you'd have a really hard time convincing me that like Josh Wiley is a guy that they just have to force onto the field in passing situations right now. And I just don't think that's what Callahan wants to be. I mean, they were top 3 in the NFL in 11 personnel usage every single year that he was in Cincinnati. I think that's what they want to be. I think they want to run 3 wide. I think they want to have 1 tight end, 1 back. And that's basically what the personnel grouping is going to be for 80+% of snaps. And I think Boyd coming here basically stamps this is what they're going to be. Because I know Boyd didn't get a ton of money, but you don't sign that kind of guy to come in and be a backup, right? Like, and I get like, right. Sure, if Treylon Burks comes out in camp and looks like prime Randy Moss or something like that, yeah, I think you probably react and find a way to get him on the field. And if that means Boyd snaps have to get cut or whatever, yeah, you're going to figure it out. But we've seen zero indication that kind of deal is coming. I think if he takes steps forward, great. But like I said on Twitter today, I think an ideal role for Treylon Burks right now is like 2019 Khalif Raymond just jumbo sized him. Like, he's going to run your clear routes. He's going to run those big posts. And every now and then you're going to catch somebody sleeping on him because, they're worried about DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd and Chigakonkwo and everybody else in this offense. And maybe Burks does get single covered and gets on top of the defense every now and then. So I think kind of a big play merchant, kind of somebody who you can throw in and just be like a little bit of a change of pace, get DeAndre Hopkins and his old legs off the field for a few plays. That's going to be the role he has, which I don't know. I just don't see any world where that's not smaller than what it would have been without Boyd in the picture, because Boyd's just going to soak up a huge chunk of those slot snaps, and if not all of them. I mean, and that to me also, obviously, like it impacts Kyle Phillips a ton to the point where, like, and I've said this the last few days, I don't think Kyle Phillips is going to make the roster.
I go back and forth on that. Well, yeah, which is really weird. I saw it, but then I saw people actually back it up. I think even and TD. Let me just say this: TD wasn't pushing against you, but he said that they typically keep 7 or 8 wide receivers.
They don't, though.
If that is the case, okay. Well, if they don't, I didn't double check. I
went back and looked. So 5 years in Cincinnati. These are the numbers of receivers that they kept on the initial 53-man roster. They had, let's see here. Where's my notes? Okay, here it is. So they kept 7 in 2019 and 2020. Then they kept 5 in 2021 and 2022, and they kept 6 last year. So like the average is 6 or less.
Yeah.
So we're actually right at 6. So the average is 6. They have never kept 8, which is a number that I saw floated out there. Now maybe they had 8 on the 53 at some point during the season with injuries and stuff like that. But as far as like making the roster out of camp, I don't think they're keeping 8 wide receivers on this team. I think they're going to keep 6, maybe 7.
That was my initial reaction, was that they were going to keep 6.
Yeah, I think 7
I'm
is
not
absolutely
convinced
max.
that it's Jaquan Jackson.
I'm not either.
There is an open. Here's the thing. There's an open competition between Kyle Phillips and Jaquan Jackson.
Yeah, and
I think
Kearis Jackson and to a lesser degree, Mason Kinsey.
Guys, we could just throw out Kearis Jackson. We're not turning that into your Julius Chestnut.
Look, Kearis Jackson to me showed just as much as what I saw on tape from Jaquan Jackson. I know he's a draft pick.
I'm not going to argue with you there, but I'll say this: if you're looking at the wide receiver position, now you can't just do that when you're talking about the 6th guy, but if you're looking for who gives you the most out of those 3 names that we just mentioned, it's definitely Kyle Phillips, in my opinion, because you could just do a punt returner from the running back room. You could do a punt returner from the cornerback room. There's other guys. They have like 14 or 15 guys this year. This is unprecedented. Like this is like American Idol of punt returners and kick returns, because they have such a long list of players to pull from that they can start, pulling. It may not be a wide receiver this year. It may not be where a wide receiver that is kept on in the 6th wide receiver role has to be the returner. He's probably the backup returner or something, but he's not your main returner. Where it feels like the previous years, if you wanted to make the roster as a wide receiver on the back end, you better be able to catch the punts and the kicks.
I still think like 95% chance that the starting opening day punt returner is a wide receiver. I think that's
and it may be, but I still think it could be Kyle Phillips. And
I think it could be too. I'm not saying it's done for Kyle Phillips here. I'm just saying he's fighting for his life now. Like it's very much
for
like
sure.
Him and Jaquan Jackson and Kearis Jackson, if you want to include him, those guys are going to be put in a mix, and you're going to get one of them. You're going to get one of them because you aren't going to keep 3 slot-only receivers, only one of which actually plays special teams, because none of those guys are playing on kick coverage or punt coverage or anything like that. Tyler Boyd doesn't play special teams at all. So Tyler Boyd is going to be your slot receiver. You're going to have a guy that's going to be in that backup slot / punt return role. And I think you're only going to have one of them. I just don't think they're going to see any value in it. Because if you look at other guys like Colton Dowell, who I think the argument is you probably see them keep 6 wide receivers total, and then Colton Dowell's on PUP and comes back, maybe mid-season or something like that. And he's a guy that they could kind of bring in once injuries and attrition start piling up at that position. But that's, to me, kind of where I expect this to head. But I just don't – I think all those other guys, those other outside receivers that are on the roster are going to add more value in other ways, because those guys could go in and play in the slot. I don't think you can go take Kyle Phillips and really play him outside to a big degree, right? So
or Jaquan Jackson, right?
Yeah,
I don't understand this idea that Jaquan Jackson's can grow into or develop into an outside wide receiver. How many guys have, with his measurables, including athleticism, have been able to do that? I can't name one.
It's rare. It's rare.
Yeah. So where are you at on the Treylon Burks thing? Because I'm of the opinion that a 6th or 7th's not worth it.
No,
I mean, you finally have depth. Like if you want to if you can find some stupid ass team, because Cowboys fans have this idea that they can fix Treylon Burks. I don't understand it. I don't know where this is coming from. Because I think that it was Marcus Mosher was talking about the big slot role when we were.
Yeah, people are obsessed with that. And I wrote about it today. Like, it just doesn't translate. Like, the slot role that he played at Arkansas does not translate in any way to the skill set required to be a slot receiver in the NFL. It's totally different. It's like, it's like the Tennessee offense, which I know like more of our audience will be familiar with than the Kendall Briles offense at Arkansas. The Heupel's offense is great. It's a great college offense. It's really, really good. It's effective. It scores points. That is what you guys should care about. But every year, y'all are going to get pissed off when it comes to be draft season because everyone's going to point to your offense and go, I don't know what to fucking do with this thing because this does not translate in any way whatsoever to what we do at the NFL level from a wide receiver standpoint, from a quarterback standpoint, from a running back standpoint. Like you'll see it all, like even offensive linemen. You're going to see people have really hard times projecting Tennessee players into the NFL. That doesn't mean they won't be good. I just think it's going to be harder evaluations for that group as opposed to some of these other college offenses. Kendall Briles, very similar deal. Like you saw guys like Corey Coleman came out of that offense when Art Briles was at Baylor. It put up massive numbers, crazy numbers, tested off the charts athletically. Comes to the NFL, he can't run routes because he didn't have to run routes at Baylor. And Treylon did not have to run real routes at Arkansas. He ran screens, he ran goes. Every now and then, he'd hit a dig or something like that. But there was not a complete route tree. And for an NFL slot receiver, you have to be able to separate short to intermediate range. That is Treylon's worst trait. He cannot do that. I just don't see this idea that like he's this power slot guy that's gonna just turn into a monster as soon as you put him inside. I don't think he's got the skill set to do it. So I think his best role, what he does best right now through 2 years of film, is being able to use his long speed to get on top of corners vertically. And now tracking and catching the ball has been an issue once he's able to do that. But I think he's got enough speed to scare you a little bit defensively and maybe push some guys back if you use him in that way, which I think is how they should use him. Again, big Khalif Raymond. So sorry, that's my soapbox on the slot.
There's also value in that, right? There's no reason to trade him for a 6th or 7th round pick swap. I mean, because if you look at what the trades have been for receivers of his ilk, that's what it is. You're not even gaining a draft pick, you're gaining like draft spots. That to me is not worth it at this point. You finally have, and I agree with Paul with this like 100%. You finally have wide receiver depth, and the first thing you want to do is trade away a guy because you want a 6th round draft pick, gain a few spots in the draft. That doesn't make sense from a team building standpoint. You finally have, I understand that Treylon Burks has not lived up to the hype, but if you've been listening to this podcast, you would have known this was his ceiling after his first year. This is kind of what we all thought it was going to be, and it got worse. The ceiling obviously got lower, but you got to stop viewing it now as he's got to hit wide receiver 1 numbers to be worth anything. His worth to this team now is entirely different than what it was 2 years ago. And that's because the Tennessee Titans have signed wide receivers that pushed him down to where the pressure and the usage is not necessary. But you don't trade that guy away to go from, 160 to 148. I mean, there's no sense in trading him away for a Jaquan Jackson, right? Like that, right. There's no sense in that. And in my mind, I look at it and I go, why get rid of it when you have the staff in place? Out of all the staffs in the league, you have a staff in place that if they really can't get anything out of Treylon Burks this year or show progression or anything, then really no one's going to. And rosters are filled out pretty much across the league. I mean, the guys you're seeing get cut are, like Martavis Bryant got cut today. Chase Claypool got signed the other day. I mean, these aren't big names. And can't you just sign Marquez Valdez-Scantling instead of trading away a draft pick? I mean, I don't get this love affair with wanting to get rid of Treylon Burks at the first sign of someone that is playing an entirely different skill set position than what Treylon Burks' main job is going to be. His main job is to be an outside wide receiver. Tyler Boyd is not that. And I even kind of think, and I had this discussion with Easton, I had this discussion that if Zay Jones came here, I kind of think they would have slotted Zay Jones in the slot and done what everybody thinks that Treylon Burks can do, but Zay Jones can actually do it, and that is be a bigger slot wide receiver. And I think that's where his main role would have been, but I think Zay Jones would have eaten way more into the opportunities of Treylon Burks. But they went with Tyler Boyd because that's who they've always wanted. They wanted a true slot guy. Zay Jones was brought in just as a bargaining chip.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I was like, Zay Jones was the Tre'Davious White of this scenario,
Right.
where the Snead trade suddenly happened when they announced they were going to bring in Trey White for a visit or whatever. But yeah, I think he was leverage, Zay Jones. But Boyd, I think, is who they wanted all along. And look, I was anti Boyd at the outset of free agency because I was under the thought process of they're probably going to sign one and draft one. And I didn't want him to be the only one that they signed. I thought they needed more help than what Boyd will give them, because I think Boyd's a good player, and don't take this as like me trashing him, but we're talking about a guy who's 29 years old, was never a good athlete to begin with. He ran 4.58 and tested below average in basically every drill at the combine back in 2016. He's now, 8 years older than what he was back then. And he's seen his production decline for 5 straight seasons. There's reasons for that, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins arriving in Cincinnati, all that. I get all that context. I think we're not talking about the 1,000-yard Tyler Boyd that a lot of people still have in their brain, because that's when he burst onto the scene and really made a name for himself, back in 2018, 2019 kind of time frame. He's not the same guy today, but he's still a very effective and productive player. It's just, you've got to put the expectations as like, he's very much your third guy, but this is the perfect role for him to be the third guy in, because they do have Ridley, they do have Hopkins. He is the third guy. He's a good third guy. We've seen that. So I think him slotting in now makes more sense to me than the idea of like when people were suggesting him as a free agent signing at the beginning of free agency before they had Ridley. And I was like, they need to aim higher than that. They need to aim higher than that. So they did aim higher. And then they also got Boyd, which I think is a home run. So yeah, I'm excited about what he's going to do for this offense. And look, they also managed to go get, especially in Boyd and Hopkins, like 2 guys that are like very much quarterback friendly. Like they know how to sit down in zones. They really have a high football IQ. And I think Ridley is to some degree as well. I think he's the best route runner out of that group by far, and the guy that will create the most separation and give them a little bit more punch as far as a deep threat, that kind of thing. But I just think those guys are going to be so reliable compared to what Levis has had the last couple of years, that I think it's going to be a huge help for him. And I do think Burks is worth keeping as a wide receiver for, just because, I mean, this is
Look,
an
if you
old
get a
group.
fourth round,
Yeah.
if you get a fourth rounder, a third rounder, I'm all for jumping it. But like, I've seen trades like say that like, let's give Treylon Burks, let's trade to the Chiefs Treylon Burks and a day 3 pick for their third rounder.
Oh, right.
The Chiefs aren't going to do that. I mean, like, what? Why would the Chiefs do that? I mean, they've been able to. The Chiefs have been able to do stuff without having a premier wide receiver that they're not going to spend draft capital on just because Rachi Rice is having issues. Because they just got Xavier Worthy, they got Hollywood Brown. They really don't. They got Justin Watson. I know that's not a sexy name, but hey, it worked, right? It worked good last year. Yeah. So I don't understand this idea that we need to see the Titans trade away Treylon Burks and a day 3 pick to gain a 5th rounder or a 4th rounder. I still would just rather just keep Treylon Burks and let them do what they said they can do, right? This staff has said it's up to us to coach these guys up and get them prepared. Well, Treylon Burks is going to be the perfect case study for that. And we're going to find out this year whether Treylon Burks is truly a problem, or if it is what I've heard, which is that he was the outcast. He was the stepson that just reminded Vrabel of his lost son, that he lost in custody or something like. That's what I've heard. And look, I'm not saying that Treylon Burks is not faultless or blameless for how his years have gone here. But at the end of the day, if you have a staff that doesn't want you here, it's really hard for you to do anything. It's really hard for you to progress as a player, progress as a staffer, or hell, it's probably hard for staff members to progress if they're not wanted to be here too. But it's really hard for you to progress under a staff that doesn't like you or doesn't want you. And at the end of the day, I think it was just a bad marriage. It was arranged marriage, obviously, but it was a bad marriage from the get-go, and it had no chance of working out. Now you have a staff that seems like it, by its actions, really likes the prospects of Treylon Burks, but they don't want to rely on Treylon Burks. I think there's a key difference. I think they think they can do something with Treylon Burks, but they're not going in saying, we know Treylon Burks will live up to the expectations and what we can do. So we have to bring in Tyler Boyd, Calvin Ridley, because we can't take the chance that Treylon Burks does not meet to the occasion, but I think they want him to. Like that, I think that's the key difference, is that they want him to achieve, because Tyler Boyd, 1-year contract. DeAndre Hopkins only has 1 year left on his contract. Calvin Ridley's contract can go sideways at any time for a multitude of reasons. We've seen it in the NFL happen all the time. If they can get Treylon Burks behind the scenes progressing the way they want to, learning under this new offense, that is a good thing, and I don't think you trade that away just because of the last 2 years for a 6th or 7th round pick.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I wouldn't trade him for peanuts. I mean, I think depth is good. I don't think that they're super high on him. I think if they were high on him, I don't think you go out and try to sign a bunch of receivers to make sure that he doesn't have to play. So to me, I think they're viewing him correctly in that, like, yeah, he has some talent. He has not shown it. He has not shown to be trustworthy, both to stay on the field or to, really be a productive, reliable target in the offense. So we're not going to expect him to do that. And it's nice because last year, I complained constantly last offseason about they built this entire roster, everybody that they brought in, and really the whole roster was set up to where, like, it's only going to work if guys do stuff that they have never done at the NFL level before, that they reach heights that they've never seen before in their careers. That they're the explosion and progression from Treylon Burks, from Chig Okonkwo, from Nicholas Petit-Frere, all these guys, that they had to have those things hit to be okay. And obviously, like, almost none of those hit. You would have hoped for a better hit rate on that because, it just odds are someone's going to pan out. But they got, I guess, good Roger McCreary and bad everything else. So I think now they're going and getting guys who have actual, skins on the wall, so to speak, as far as Hopkins, Ridley, Boyd, even, looking at Lloyd Cushenberry, Woozy, Snead, all these guys, they don't have to play at a level higher than what the Titans have ever seen before, because the level that they've played at recently is good enough for them to be successful right away. So I like the approach, and I think the Titans are now in a spot where Treylon Burks, if he's anything better than what he's been the last 2 years, that's gravy on top of this thing. That's great. Now you've got depth. And if DeAndre Hopkins has a knee issue pop up and you need to sit him for a game to help him get it right, you don't feel terrible about that because Treylon Burks can step in and play and give you something. If he progresses, I'm not saying like if he plays like he did last year that he gives you anything, because he didn't, but I think there's a chance, and I certainly don't think they should be trading away depth for peanuts. I mean, it's just not. What's the point? Unless he's like a malcontent behind the scenes that's causing problems, which there's been no indication that he is, or that he's like trying to posture for a trade or something crazy like that. I mean, maybe that would, change my mind at some point. But I don't think he's that kind of guy, really. I think he's honestly a pretty good dude who, has not had the greatest NFL experience so far. And
He's
I'm
probably
rooting for
super
him.
excited to be with this staff. I mean,
Yeah,
I would have to assume that Treylon Burks is probably elated to be with this staff. He may not be happy that, there's 3 guys ahead of him on the depth chart, but, that's for him to change, right? That's for him to force them to change their mind on that and to give him more snaps and all this kind of stuff. I mean, but I'm sure it's got to be, I think for probably most people, it's probably a big sigh of relief that from a difference in style, more easily relatable for today's NFL player. Because I mean, like, I do think that Vrabel was a player's head coach, but I do think that his shtick can probably wear thin on a lot of players, and maybe that is just. But that's just a generational thing. I feel like the way that he conducts business versus the way that probably Brian Callahan will conduct business is a little bit different. But in my mind, I'm like, this is probably more about the soft guys in the locker room, like Treylon Burks and Malik Willis. But I'm sure they probably are enjoying going to work a little bit more with Brian Callahan there and not Vrabel lording over them. And those are the bad players or the players that haven't lived up to expectation.
Exactly. And I do think, some of it is just a personality thing. But I like I said, I'm rooting for Burks. Look, I'm rooting for Phillips too, because it's better for the Titans if those guys do show something and earn a role on this team and show that they can actually give you something moving forward. Because look, like we said, the starting wide receivers are very old. And of them are not under contract for the 2025 season. So they do need some of these guys to
really wish they would have gotten a wide receiver that could have been here next year. But you hope that that's Treylon Burks, right? I mean, like, you hope that Treylon Burks behind the scenes turns into that.
In an ideal world.
But, like, I mean, I much rather would have had Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors right here in 2025 than Treylon Burks. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, but that's the situation they find themselves in because of poor drafting and poor development for the last few years, and they're just trying their best with the resources they have without sacrificing future resources, a la the cap and money and cash. They're trying their best to put the best situation around Will Levis that they can. That's what you got to do, right? They're going to have to draft a wide receiver at some point. Probably going to be next year, but I feel like we say that every year. But I would say that if the offensive line is progresses like we think, that leaves the door open for a wide receiver next year. So I think that, I think people want a long-term solution with Treylon Burks. I don't think there is one. I think there is a path to one, but I don't think there is one. But that's not really what the plan. What's a good way to put this? The way that they have moved is that if Treylon Burks turns out to be the guy, then that's the plan they take. They've created 2 paths for themselves.
Yeah.
Path number 1, Treylon Burks turns into the guy behind the scenes that is undeniably a wide receiver 2 in this league, and we compare him with Calvin Ridley next year. Or path number 2, we kept him for a year. He still didn't work out under our system. We know that now. He's a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 in this league. He ain't going to amount to anything. But at least now we know for sure, while at the same time we had 2 really good wide receivers in Tyler Boyd and DeAndre Hopkins still help our young quarterback out. Like, I think that is the path that you're looking at, and both are good paths, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with giving yourself multiple strategies. We know that this team likes to have multiple strategies, multiple plans in place, backup plans upon backup plans and all this stuff, contingencies and all this stuff. And that's what this is, right? Everything they've done is to give themselves flexibility in future years, whether that's signing wide receivers and 1-year contracts, or signing wide receivers and keeping younger wide receivers, or this or that. They've done everything that they can to provide themselves future flexibility. And that's what good teams do. Good teams sign 1-year vets who come in and do a little thing, and then hopefully their young guys progress. And if they don't progress, they just move on without the young guys and probably the older guy too.
Yeah, and I think, and look, there's also, just because the guy's on a 1-year deal doesn't mean he can't come back next year if it's a success, right? Like, if he comes in and he puts up 800 yards and 6 touchdowns and is an integral part of the offense, and Will Levis loves him. I'm sure he'll be back again the next year. They'll find a way to make that happen. But it is kind of an interesting scenario that they've got here with Hopkins and Burks specifically, and what they could do at those spots. But I do think one thing that I want to mention with this whole Boyd deal is I think him being here also is a positive impact for the entire receiver room as a whole, just from the offseason standpoint of you've got a guy in here who knows what Brian Callahan wants, who knows what his expectations are, who knows, these drills that I'm sure they're going to have him, those guys running, who knows how to do the drills, who can lead the lines, who can get everybody lined up, who can kind of lead that room as far as like the installation of the offense. Now, I don't think Boyd is going to be the leader of the room in the sense that he's going to be the voice. I think that's going to be DeAndre Hopkins, almost without question, right? But I think Boyd can help with some of that stuff. And I think Boyd's got enough production and experience at the NFL level that he'll come in and immediately have the respect of Hopkins and have the respect of Ridley. And I think those guys will be excited to play together too. So I think you're going to see guys that can come in and learn quicker because they've got a colleague and a teammate who has played in this system before, who's played for this coach before, who can kind of, be a extra coach on the field and in the meeting rooms when they're doing this install this summer. So I think it's helpful for the whole room as well as, Will Levis. I mean, obviously like the quarterback wide receiver relationship is going to be one of the most important in the building. And the fact that he's going to be echoing what Brian Callahan coaches back to his quarterback when they talk is I think big and helpful. So I think this makes sense on way too many levels. That's why as soon as they met with him, I was like, yeah, this is going to happen.
Yeah.
So,
well, pretty boy Ricky, or Pretty Ricky said it was going to happen. So it's definitely going to happen because that guy rarely misses. He rarely misses. My thing is that like, this is just when you kind of look at it all, right, you look at the connections. DeAndre Hopkins doesn't really have a connection to anybody on this staff, but I mean, he's a locker room leader. He's smart. He knows the game. He knows everything that you can get. He's a good mentor for these young guys. Tyler Boyd, you've just went through everything for him, but you're talking about bringing in Jaquan Jackson, Kyle Phillips. There's tricks of the trades for both those guys. It's not just maybe what's on the field, but also how to handle your body, how to train. There's a lot of stuff that those two guys can lend everybody else because Tyler Boyd's been pretty durable for most of his career and dependable. And sometimes what's lost in a young locker room, and the Titans have had a relatively weird wide receiver locker room these last 2 years where last year, I think the oldest guy was Chris Moore, but the most tenured guy was Nick Westbrook-Akine until DeAndre Hopkins was signed. And then the year before that, it was Robert Woods. So it's a jarring, almost unbelievable situation that the Titans have turned around their wide receiver room and their cornerback room drastically as they have. Two very important positions on the field, but L'Jarius Sneed and Cheeto can really help, these younger cornerbacks that they have. I mean, the oldest one, I think, is Caleb Farley after them too, right? If I'm not mistaken. You look at the wide receiver room, the oldest one is NWI after these other three guys. And then you got Treylon Burks, Kyle Phillips, Jaquan Jackson. They all can learn, even from Calvin Ridley, who has a relationship with Nick Holtz in a system. Press Taylor, it's not Zach Taylor. It's not an exact system copy or anything, but he is probably going to be able to help Treylon Burks. Calvin Ridley has had kind of an up and down career, from an off the field standpoint. So, there's some stuff that Treylon Burks can learn from there. Route running, for sure, you can learn from Calvin Ridley, right? I mean, you're talking about one of the best at that in the game. So, in my mind, I'm looking at it, we went from where you're having to rely on Rob Moore to be the mentor of these wide receivers, to now you have DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, and Calvin Ridley, to each with their own things that they can pass on to these younger wide receivers. And if you're Jaquan Jackson and Kyle Phillips, my hip is attached to I am hip side by side to Tyler Boyd everywhere he goes, everything he says, everything he does. I am copying that because he's one of the best slot receivers in the league as far as what he is able to do. Because if you listen to what Ramon said, a lot of the emphasis being placed by teams on nickel corner is because of what Tyler Boyd is kind of ushered into the slot role. Now, there's been other explosive guys and all this stuff, but Tyler Boyd is the reliable guy that is going to beat you with technique. I mean, he has the most separation yards from 2023 on this team right now. Like, he has like over 3 yards per yards of separation per target. That's pretty good, compared to the other guys. So there's obviously, without speed, he's doing something right. And I think at the end of the day, what you can learn from these three guys can really help the progression of some of these guys that have kind of middled and piddled around this locker room for these last 2 or 3 years. So I don't know. I mean, like, I really love, and I'm kind of like you. It's kind of like Ladd McConkey, right? I love the addition of Tyler Boyd, and I would have loved to have drafted Ladd McConkey, but only because you signed Calvin Ridley. If that hadn't happened, we're talking about an entirely different situation. And so, Calvin Ridley was a big chain reaction for this entire team, and I think it really changed what this team was trying to do. To be honest with you, was like, they were kind of like planting in everybody's head, oh, this is probably gonna be a 2 or 3 year turnaround. We'll be competitive, but it's probably a 2 or 3 year turnaround. And this kind of still is a 2 or 3 year turnaround, but we're gonna see a much more competitive team than what you thought on the outset of free agency.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like this kind of might be oversimplifying, but I really feel like the competitiveness and what the Titans are going to be in 2023 or 2024 ultimately comes down to what is Will Levis and is J.C. Latham able to be pretty good right away. And I think those two players, if you get good out of both of them, this is going to be a good offense, I think, right away. Like, it may not be like top 5 in the NFL, but like top 10, top 15, I think it's very much in play because I think they've got a lot of talent, all at all the skill positions. And then you just got to see what you've got in Levis and can you pass protect well enough to give him time. And I think ultimately Latham is the key piece of that on the offensive line because I feel like you know what you're getting out of Cushenberry. I think Skoronski will be better, but you kind of know a little bit what his floor is anyways at this point, which is good enough. So I think you're going to look, you may not get good play out of your right guard and right tackle, but it's okay. Like, you don't have to have a team of 11 all-stars to be a good offense, right? Like, the Chiefs have weak links. The Bills have weak links. It's, can the other guys make up for those? And can you hide them well enough with scheme? And I think the answer to that was no last year because they didn't have talent. They just didn't have the talent to cover those gaps where they popped up, and they didn't have the scheme to cover the gaps either. So I think we'll see, how the scheme looks with Callahan running the show. Obviously, like, I'm a big fan of Callahan. I love his approach to the game. Everything about what he's done so far has been positive to me. But, first time head coach, we'll see how it works out. First time play caller too. But I don't know. I'm kind of bullish on this idea that, like, if Levis is who they want to believe that he is, this good offense could be good right away. And if they're good right away, then I think the defense will be good enough that you're going to be competitive and you're going to be in the mix for a wild card spot or maybe even to push for the division, at least up until the last few weeks. So I think it it all comes down to Levis and to a lesser degree Latham. To me, I think those are your two key people on this team right now that are just unknowns, because everyone else has established qualities that are in key spots. So,
who do you expect to be the safety when day one rolls around? Throw out a bet. Who do you think is the safety opposite Amani Hooker?
I'm gonna guess it's Marcus May.
That's what I'm thinking too.
I think that's.
I would like for it to be Justin Simmons, but I think it's going to be Marcus May.
I'd rather it be Simmons too, but the safe bet I think is May. I don't know if, but I mean, look, the longer this drags on, I mean, Simmons' price is going to have to come down at some point. And what Rossini said when the Titans initially were interested in Simmons, and then it kind of went quiet, and she was asked, well, what happened with that? She just responded with dollar signs. So I think it was just a money thing. I think they want him. I think he's interested in playing here and playing for Denard Wilson, but it's just whether or not he'll come down on his ask or they'll come up on their offer. I don't know. I think it could still be in play, but if I had to bet, I'm betting the safe one with Marcus May.
What are your, and this will wrap up. I have one more question after this. What are your feelings on this edge group, this edge rotation?
Yeah,
because I mean, I think we're both a little underwhelmed and surprised by how they've attacked that position, especially after what they said. I think that you think that Rashad Weaver is going to play a lot of snaps, but I'm still under this impression that it's kind of like, I still feel like they just weren't able to address it. So it's still going to be Arden Key playing early on the downs and probably a lot of snaps just because that's the situation they found themselves in. It's not like a ideal spot. I mean, I'm still holding out hope that maybe Carl Lawson is brought in on a low risk, rent a year deal or something. But man, this is a tough scene.
Yeah, it's bad. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. To me, it might be the worst position group on the roster at this point.
Which is crazy to think about right now, by the way.
Yeah.
It feels like a stark difference from last year.
And that may be not totally fair, because I do think Landry's still a really good player. I just don't have any faith in Key being a early down good enough run defender to be like, he doesn't need to play 80 or 90%.
That run defense doesn't matter.
I mean, it doesn't, but it does too. Like, you need to be okay.
For the purposes of this conversation,
there's a reason that Yannick Ngakoue is still sitting there without a job right now, and it's not because he can't rush the passer. I went full Collinsworth there. It's not because he can't rush the passer. It is because he will not even give an effort against the run. I think Key's better than him against the run, but it's not good. I don't know if Jalen Harrell can eat some of those snaps. I kind of liked that pick late in the draft. We'll see.
That's asking a lot from a 7th rounder, right?
It is. I mean, but these are and we had this conversation in the group chat the other day. And I was like, to be clear, all these options suck. And that's ultimately where I feel. Because I think Rashad Weaver, if you're going to play him, you want to play him on early downs because he's just nothing as a pass rusher for the most part. And he's a better run defender than he is a pass rusher anyway. So I think maybe you see some Weaver on early downs and Key kind of platooning that role. Maybe you see some Jalen Harrell or, everybody's favorite Caleb Murphy. Maybe he has a second year breakout, who knows? I don't know. I'm down on that group as a whole. I would love to see, like you said, Carl Lawson, Emmanuel Agba. I've mentioned Bud Dupree's name multiple places now, and I stand by the fact that, look, I understand people are upset about him, but you're not paying him $16 million. What did the Falcons pay him last year? It was maybe like, $4 million, $3 million? It was not a lot of money. To come in and be like an early down, run edge setter. You can take him off the field for third downs. He doesn't have to rush the passer, but I think he still does that well enough to be worthy of a roster spot. I'd rather play Bud Dupree than play Rashad Weaver. So I guess that's where I'm at with the Bud Dupree thing. I know people, it's unpopular. It's wildly unpopular.
Yeah.
You'd think I'd said let's line up Osama bin Laden at edge or something like that. But it's it's definitely unpopular. But hey, that's where I'm at. That's how desperate I am at this edge group.
It's bad. It's a bad edge group, and I've been a little shocked that it seems to be from even reports that this is kind of like on the back burner.
Well, they tried with Chase Young, but that was about it, right?
Yeah, and maybe this is more of says more about what they feel the surroundings are, and they feel that okay, well, we got 3 really good corners, 4th if you want to count Jarvis Brownlee. We have Amani Hooker, we have Harold Landry, we have Tandre Sweat, we have Sebastian Joseph Day, we have obviously Big Jeff, we got Kenneth Murray, who's a heat-seeking missile. We'll have Cedric Gray. So maybe edge 2 isn't as important as we made it out to be. As I guess offensive guard like 13, however many offensive linemen that play on the right side. I mean, by the way, it feels like all the linemen play on the right side. There's like 5 that play on the left. The rest of the 20 play on the right side. But maybe they're just saying that, okay, well, we still got to get safety. So we're still going to have to push off edge even further. We probably need to find someone behind Latham at some point, and maybe that's a guy on the roster that we're just not as high on. Maybe it is Leroy Watson. Maybe he is the backup left tackle. I don't know. But it feels like there's a path to needing someone there. I know a lot of people are talking about backup center, but you have Daniel Brunskill that could probably do it. And I would assume, I think Dylan Radins has taken snaps at center as well throughout the off seasons before.
Maybe.
I may be wrong on that, but I feel like I remember reports on that. So don't hold me to it, but I feel like I remember hearing that. So I'm not as concerned about center as maybe other people are. But man, this edge rotation, it is bad. It's like a 3-headed monster, right? It's Jalen Harrell, Arden Key, and Rashad Weaver, all of which give you a third of what you need at any given point. So they're like, if you have Rashad Weaver and it's a pass play, you're kind of fucked. If you have Arden Key and it's a run play, probably not that good. Probably same for Jalen Harrell in that case. So I don't know.
Two things I'll add to it. One, we should probably start like, those prayer circle things that go around on Twitter. We should probably start like a prayer circle for all of Harold Landry's ligaments and body parts. Because can you imagine if you lost Harold Landry, how bad of a situation the Titans would suddenly find themselves in? And actually, I have 3 things. But the second thing, I've seen Trey Hendrickson's name tossed around a good bit. I get it. He would be great. Like, he would be a great addition. I just don't think they have the assets to continue throwing draft picks away like they're, disposable. Like, this isn't the Rams, the fuck them picks Rams from a few years ago. I don't think that that's going to end up happening. And then the third thing about the edge group is that maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter because the plan is we're going to smother you with these 3 fucking corners, and then we're going to blitz the shit out of you with Kenneth Murray and Cedric Gray, and we're going to bring Roger McCreary off the slot, and we're going to throw in, some, safety blitz or, just get kind of weird with the blitz packages. I mean, it is Denard Wilson's mentors are Greg Williams and Todd Bowles. Those are the 2 guys he brings up all the time. What are those guys known for? They just throw crazy ass blitzes all the time. That's how they generate pass rush. And so maybe the thought is we don't need a pass. We don't need like a dedicated edge rusher. We just need guys that can blitz and get after you a little bit, and we'll figure it out and make your quarterback hold the ball for 3.5 seconds. I don't know. But it'll. That is the spot. It has me nervous. It has me nervous.
It's not a good spot to be in if you're the Tennessee Titans. Mike, any last anything that we may have missed when covering the Tyler Boyd, Treylon Burks discourse that's really pissed you off that we didn't get to? I think we covered everything.
I think we hit everything. Yeah. No, yeah.
Anything good. You want? Go ahead.
No, I was just saying Boyd good. Yeah, Burks.
Yeah, Boyd good. Burks, we'll see. Like we'll see. what Burks is. Last chance and all that kind of jazz, and time is running out on Treylon Burks, really for him to prove to the entirety of the NFL. Because I don't really think there may be like one or two wide receiver coaches who are like, oh yeah, you see that Green Bay game? That's it. Now, if we could just get that guy, every time, there may be like one or two of those wide receiver coaches, but I don't think anybody's really clamoring the table to give up draft assets for Treylon Burks at this point. And that says a lot about this league, because I feel like this league is very much a we can fix them kind of league. Everybody's got that certain kind of ego, which you have to be in this league. But again, if other teams have that kind of ego, there's a good chance he's got a few supporters in this room that they feel like. I could venture to say, I think that Tyke Tolbert probably comes in and says, yeah, I see where they failed on this one. I think I can fix it. I think Brian Callahan could probably say the same. That's why they have. That's why they're in the position that they're in. So I'm not believing anything. I'm just saying that I think it's silly to want to trade Treylon Burks for a 6th or 7th round pick. It ain't worth it in my mind. Does that mean I think it won't happen or something? Hell, I don't know. I didn't think Snead was going to be, traded for before the rumors kicked up. I didn't think that Calvin Ridley was even on the radar. I mean, this team does stuff that, hell, they drafted Jaquan Jackson. I did not see that one coming at all. So this team has done stuff that I disagree with or do agree with and didn't see coming, but I don't know. I kind of feel like you keep Treylon Burks right now. I don't see any reason not to.
I agree. Enjoy having depth at one position for once in your life.
Yeah, I mean, my God, we've never seen this kind of depth at this kind of quality or good depth at this position. We've seen really shitty depth at this position, lots of it. So I don't know. I just say sit back and enjoy it. And what are you gonna do with the 6th round pick? Who gives a shit at this point? You ain't gonna find Tom Brady probably, so I'm not gonna worry about it.
Did you real quick? We got to get out of here, but real quick, did you watch the roast of Tom Brady yet?
I didn't finish it because when I started it, we started late, and it's so freaking long, but it was so good, and I was like, so we never got to the Tony Kill. I think the last one we saw.
Tony Kill was good.
Yeah, I saw the clip of it, but we didn't watch it live. Okay. But I mean, it was brutal. It was good. I loved it, and
Mickey Glazer was the best. It kind of petered out a little bit towards the end, I thought, but Tony Kill was great.
Really good.
Andrew Schultz was pretty good too. Sam.
I didn't think the two Bears dudes they were that good. I thought they were one of the worst ones.
That was awful. Which I usually like Tom Segura. So I was surprised that was bad. But that like none of that hit for me. But I love it was really, really good. It was really well worth the time.
Aaron Hernandez's wife coming out and being all mad about it because it's their daughter's gonna go into school and all their kids are gonna be talking about these jokes and it will really taint the vision that she has as a hero. Does the murders not do that for your daughter? Like, have you not told your daughter that her father is a big time murderer?
I feel some sympathy from the fact that, like, I'm sure they want to move on. This thing brought it up a lot. I was actually shocked at the number of Hernandez jokes that were in there. A lot of them were really good, but almost uncomfortable. And I understand the idea that, like, all right, that's going to bring it back up again. They don't want to go through all that deal again. I sympathize with that, but at the same time, we're talking about, like, it's not like these kids have never heard
of Aaron Hernandez.
Yeah, these kids don't know the story or anything. Like, it's not some big secret. Good Lord. Or like SNL will bring it up, like, every now and then still. Yeah. Like, it's not.
Yeah. I think everybody knows at this point. I don't think anything can get further tainted about that. All right, that'll do it for us. Football and Other F Words we'll have Stoney on next week. I won't be here next week. I'll be traveling to Memphis in May, so it'll be Stoney and Mike next week. And then we'll have the trio back after that. Hendersonville, Bluegrass Beverages. Don't go out there today because it's starting to storm out right here in Goodlettsville, which is next door neighbors to Hendersonville. So thunder's coming. Stay safe and make sure that you subscribe, you like, you rate, review, and all that kind of stuff. Football and Other F Words. Go to subscribe to stackithinbox.com. Subscribe to paulkarsky.com. Follow Mike on Twitter at Mike Herndon NFL. You can follow me on Twitter at EffortsPod. This has been Football and Other F Words, and you have just been effed.